Hello and welcome to this evening's video. And hello Isa, hello Hank, hello Annie. And so as always, if you've got any questions about what I'm talking about, then please use it. You do not have to actually ask questions on this on the subject. It could be about something else if I know anything about it. Today I'm going to talk about sanctions. And just before the last live broadcast ended, I had to end it because I had another video on another channel, coming up. But the question came up: what do I think about sanctions? Are they working? And so let's have a little look at sanctions. Sanctions have existed for a very long time, and indeed we all use sanctions from time to time. You don't like the person who works in a shop, so you don't go to that shop, right? So they are sanctions. Or you don't like the behavior of a company or whatever. But so everybody puts sanctions on things from time to time. And I'm going to come back to this because what sanctions that you put on could actually help to save lives. The first major case of sanctions that I can think of is in 1935. In that year, Mussolini invaded Abyssinia, and this was in Abyssinia, Ethiopia today, in the Horn of Africa. They invaded from two Italian colonies, one in Eritrea and the other one in Somalia. In 1896, on the 29th of February 1896, there was the Battle of Adwa, which was the only major engagement which led to the defeat of an attempted European colonization of an African country. There have been defeats. For example, the British were defeated at Isandlwana by the Zulus in 1879, but it ended up being a British victory in the war. Whereas, so hello Emmy and hello Badger, and so in Italy had this idea of having another crack at it. Italy did, however, in 1913, it got the colony in Libya following its attack, and as well as islands in the Aegean following its attack on Turkey. 1913 was, no, sorry, 1911, I got that wrong. In that war saw the first bombing attack on a civilian target. Hello, Dave. So, in 1935, Italy invades Abyssinia. It's an extremely brutal war, and I think the brutality of this war is often forgotten. Around 500,000 Abyssinian people died. Now, the Abyssinians themselves were using very old weapons, mainly single shots. Some of them only had spears, and they're facing an Italian army, which was, for the time, absolutely modern. Furthermore, an army which started to use gas. It didn't actually. It was probably sort of like CS gas, sort of that was used in riots and things of that nature. But it was extremely brutal, and the League of Nations decided to do something about it. Now, it could, of course, be argued that these countries, such as Britain, France, United States, well, sorry, not United States. United States wasn't in the League of Nations. Britain and France had their own colonies themselves. Like most of them, Africa was divided between them. So they said, well, then in that case, why shouldn't Italy have a colony of its own? So what happened was Britain and France decided to put sanctions. So these sanctions were put on Italy, but they didn't put them on everything. And the two things which really had to put sanctions on were coal and oil. Now, Italy was supplied in coal from Nazi Germany, but oil it needed to get from largely the United Kingdom. And the attitude of the British government was that if it puts sanctions and doesn't supply oil to Italy, the United States which would do it. Now, the United States was outside the sanctions, so it didn't do these two things, and the result was this: it was enough to annoy Mussolini, so he couldn't get his dog food or something, but he could continue to get the vital war materials of coal, which was needed to keep the industry going, and oil, which was needed to get the troops to Abyssinia. So it was a complete failure. So in annoying Mussolini, it put him into the same camp as Hitler, but it didn't really actually it didn't actually work. Now, sanctions have been used in various other times since then. For example, 40 years ago, this very day, during the Argentinian occupation of the Falkland Islands, it was suggested that if sanctions are put against Argentina, then it'll clear off the Falkland Islands within 6 months. I remember reading that. It was an article in hindsight. It was done towards the end of 1982. But by some, I think, rather left-wing member of parliament. This is nonsense. Of course, that would never have happened. And it was clearly a case that countries will only buckle down. Now, sanctions busting as well. I'll tell you two experiences from my own lifetime. In 1995, I was in Yugoslavia or Serbia. And during the war, there was supposedly sanctions, and there was these ships going up and down, the naval ships on the Danube. You could see them. But when you get on these villages on the border, and the Danube is really wide, it's like a lake. It doesn't look like a river at all. And so these little ships were going backwards and forwards, and they're bringing the oil in. And so you could buy fuel. I mean, the fuel was expensive, of course. You could be buying 5-litre canisters and maybe 10-litre, but it was stuff that was carryable. So it's obviously it wasn't working as long as the Romanian petrol stations were selling the oil to them. Maybe they had people in Romania, maybe the petrol stations weren't selling it to them, but maybe they were buying some other. I don't know. I didn't see on the Romanian side. So that's number one. Number two is I actually witnessed directly in 2014 Russia put sanctions on itself, and it decided it wasn't going to buy food products from the European Union. So this was bad news for people who were growing apples and the likes. But the way around this was Belarus didn't have these sanctions, nor did, for example, Serbia have these sanctions, nor did Kazakhstan. So Russians could buy from these countries. So what they did do was they were buying from Poland. I actually witnessed this. I saw them come up with the front part, the tractor part of the vehicle was Russian, but the container part was from Belarus. It got filled up with apples. Now, at the end of the day, the only person had losses because of this were the poor Russian people who had to pay extra for the benefit of eating apples. Another thing which happened as a result of the sanctions that happened in 2014 was that the Russian industry started to supply its own, so a revived industry. Not having said that, though, agriculture is very inefficient by Western Europe or Central European standards, European Union standards. Industry is like it's still left in many cases in a different age. You can't say like in the communism, but it wasn't. Now, I want to see some of these questions here. So I see the sanctions backfired on the European Union. The United States is buying Russian gas still to sell to EU more expensive. There are some companies in the United States, but I don't think they're not buying gas. Shell has admitted to buying diesel oil. As far as I'm aware, there might be things I don't know. Now, Colin writes, and this is the whole point of what I wanted to actually discuss today, was the Russian ruble is exactly where it was against the same basket of currencies as it was before the sanctions were imposed. How are the Russians able to do this? I can answer that question, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. Formerly, I was the publisher of a business magazine. I also wrote not just me, it was three of us, who wrote the economic forecasts for a bank. So, and our greatest success, and I'm going to boast about this now, 2003, we forecast that the euro would overtake the dollar. When we said that, it seemed most ridiculous, but it happened. We said by 2008, in fact, it happened a couple of years earlier than that, 3 years earlier than that, if I remember rightly. Anyway, good. The Russian ruble is not, this is actually a myth. This is put out, the strength of the ruble is being put out now for propaganda purposes within Russia. The ruble is not convertible in the same way. If it were this, that you had 90 euros in your back pocket and you could go to an exchange place and say, I want €1, that would be exchangeable. Alternatively, if you had euros in your bank account and you wanted to withdraw them, like I have, for example, here I'm in Poland now, but I've got an account in euros, I've got an account in pounds, I can withdraw it. But what has happened is that Russian companies must exchange their foreign currencies for rubles. That's number one. So people are not allowed to withdraw above, I think it's 10,000 euros. Now, 10,000 euros, if you're going on holiday to Spain for a couple of weeks, that'll buy you a lot of sangria. On the other hand, if you're going to try and buy a container full of clothes or something, that 10,000 euros isn't going to go very far. And so this is a major problem. Another thing that the Russians have done, the Russian government, is that it said it will compulsorily purchase gold at a rate of 5,000 rubles to the gram. And this policy was announced, I can't quite remember, it was it was at the beginning of March. Now, what this means is that if you look at when this policy was announced, okay, the ruble had started to recover as a result of these other things I've mentioned. But what it did, this put the rate of the ruble to roughly the same as the price of gold, which, as I recall, is hovering around $62 to the gram at the moment. Therefore, so it's sort of, it's not fair to say it's pegged to the ruble's pegged to gold. That's not correct. But as I've heard some people say, that isn't the case. But what it's done is it's brought it up to a level which similar to that of gold, but it's only done through the compulsory purchase at this fixed price. Now, if you held gold in the bank, and maybe you were some big jeweler, or maybe, I don't know, something else, you had lots of gold, then what you would do is you certainly don't want to end up with a pile of rubles for which you can't do anything with. So therefore, as the ruble may now be worth around 90 rubles to the euro, I didn't look it up today, but something along those lines, this is not a real value. The free market value, as I say, the black market value, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to forecast now that the real value is something around probably close to 120, 130. I suspect. I mean, as official to real market values go, that's not actually such a huge difference. I can say this: in Poland 40 years ago, the difference was tenfold. So when there was 150 zloty to the pound, theoretically, it was in reality was 1,500. So if the currency is not convertible for normal people, you can't. They can say it's worth whatever it's want. Putin's done this for his domestic audience. and like demanding that payment be made in rubles, that could theoretically create a demand for it. Theoretically. There's one thing I would also have to point out as well, is that Russia did not default on its bond payments, because there was a lot of thought that Russia wouldn't bother paying its bonds back. There's now I can't remember the source of this information. 99% certainty that Russia would default. Somebody said, I can't remember. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't even start saying it because I can't remember my source. But there is a fear that Russia in the future, though, could actually default on payments. Now, let's go. Sorry, I don't know if I've answered that one or not. But the Russian ruble is not at its same level, because it's not. If Russian people can start going to the bank and getting their own money out in euros, then if they can't do that, then you know there's a problem. Right, okay, Emir writes that Russia is self-sufficient in many fields. Well, the most important field is, of course, food, and it isn't self-sufficient in food. And as Badger points out, self-sufficient in raw materials, yeah, but Russia's got a huge amount of raw materials. It's probably the luckiest country in the world as far as raw materials are concerned. But then again, it does occupy more than 10% of the world's surface. So there you go. Okay, Colin asked me how was Łódź. Well, I haven't been there yet. I'm going there on Wednesday. And I see that okay, some news items here. Somebody's denied an S-300 from Slovakia was hit. Sorry, that's Apkidlathium. I don't know anything about that. I can't say. And oh yeah, Nani points out they're going to make their own Burger King. Now, in 2014, there was an attempt to make a Russian version of McDonald's. I can't remember what it was called now. I've forgotten. But they raised enough money. I mean, a lot of the way that money is raised in Russia, of course, is if the government says it, then one of these oligarchs puts up the cash. The reason they put up the cash is because they don't want to end up like hot dog. It sort of works these days. And so anyway, so they try to set up this burger thing. I don't know what happened to it. There's lots of countries, lots of businesses have things which are similar sort of thing to McDonald's, but they never manage to copy it in the same way. And there was a place in again, I'm talking about Poland now, but there's this company called Mickey Mac or something like that, and they did burgers and things. Anyway, I don't know if they went bankrupt or went out of business or what, but then disappeared. But their place that they had, I was living in Szczecin in northern Poland then, and so the Mickey Mac went out of business, and it was taken by McDonald's. Did a week of conversion, reopened McDonald's, and McDonald's was always full. So there's clearly something wrong with the Mickey Mac, whereas the McDonald's was working well. Now there are some fast food chains in Russia, which do Russian food. Terramok. I've got video on my other site of Terramok because I think Terramok's great. I always go. And there's another one called Moo Moo, which is a bit more. I don't know if upscale is the right word, but yeah, it's like a buffet, but I have Russian food, and I like going there. Anyway, Emir writes, Russia was before sanctions annexed Crimea. So yeah, at the time of Russia must have prepared. Yes, certainly it must have prepared. It doesn't seem to have prepared all that well though, because the amount of money that was actually blocked abroad, something like 2/3 of currencies held abroad were in its central bank reserves were blocked. That really it doesn't show very good planning. I mean, if I'd had 6 years warning, not 6 years warning, 8 years warning, I think I would have. I think I'd have moved the money anyway. Yeah. Colin writes that the museum in Radegast, which is in for the Łódź ghetto, was still closed. Yeah, it could well be. And yeah, is this a propaganda exercise, right, Colin? Yes, as far as the rubles go, yes, I think so. It's not a real currency. If somebody can withdraw their bank account, then it's, if they can't, then it's propaganda. It's not true. It's done for domestic use. If you go to a foreign exchange place, or your bank or something, and then they've got a spread. For example, if you want to change euros into dollars, and there'll be a spread between the buying price and the selling price, and that spread could be as much as like 6 or 7%, something like that. But when you see these places where we have currencies which aren't in so much demand, you go like, for example, Thai baht or something like that, and you start seeing a bigger spread. And if you went and looked at Russian currency, you'd probably have a spread close to 35-40%. Also that depends, obviously, if they want to hold it or not. I have seen videos related to this thing about the Russian gold purchases, which suggested that the purchases were it's far better to have a gold-based currency than a paper-based currency. But clearly, it's when you've got compulsory purchase of things like this, then it's not really gold-based at all. Anyway, do I think that China has Russia in its hands now? Yeah, could be. You could say that, Badger. I think it's different. So I'm just going in. Is Germany still occupied? No, it isn't. The United States does have its bases in, but Germany is not an occupied country. The United States doesn't control the government of Germany. And Bogdan has actually come up with the point which I really wanted to make it towards the end. And it's that Russia could get away with it. North Korea has had sanctions on it for I don't know how long it's been saying. It's been years and years and years. The people live in abject poverty. There was starvation. We don't know how many people starved in North Korea in the 90s. It could have been hundreds of thousands. I mean, I've even heard 2 million quote. But this doesn't affect those at the top, because what people do not often understand, what this war is about, is to stop the Russian people rebelling. Putin cannot have a democratic country which had a revolution, got rid of the previous corrupt government. It's that the only way to maintain Putin's hold on power is to keep the Russian people down. Russia, with all these fantastic resources, you've got only one house in 3 is connected to gas. So how do they do cooking? Wood. Right? How many people do you know that have do their cooking on wood fires, for example? I use in Russia. I read in Novaya Gazeta in February that I think it's 17 million people don't have access to an ambulance. So I mean, that's a very basic healthcare. They don't have access to it, but they do have huge amounts of arms. Have a look on Google Maps at some places. I don't mean the big cities, because the big cities are great. I mean, they've got normal, looks the same. But if you go into smaller places, you'll see there's not even asphalt on the roads. People in Russia, the average earnings in Russia are very similar to the average earnings GDP is very similar per capita between Russia and India. So this is a very poor country, but it's kept in its place by this government. And people, if they're happy to be in poverty, they're happy not to have hospitals, but they can say, look, we've got all these rockets. Then okay, well, that's the way it is. But Anyway, a lot, yeah. Bogdan says there's a rumor a lot of the resorts in Antalya are owned by Russians. Well, actually, I did put up a video last week showing the Russian writer who was urging the committing mass murder in Ukraine. And in this article, and the one that I put up, there was an advertisement for holiday homes in Turkey. Yes, I think lots of thing with Russia is this. When they started looting the country, and this happened before Putin, but it's continued under Putin, is that money didn't stay in Russia. It can't stay in Russia because if there's a revolution and people then get control of the banks or what have you, the money has to be sent abroad. So it's stolen from the Russian people. Sorry, it's misappropriated from the Russian people because it might not quite be stolen, it may not be the word. And then it's sent to places such as offshore islands in the United Kingdom. And then this money is invested in all sorts of other things. Now, the problem is obviously for normal people with normal investments, this is unfair. It's a bit like trying to compete with criminals because you can't compete with criminals because the criminals got all this massive amount of cash in one go, and then they get their businesses up and running. I think that most of these oligarchs probably now have more money coming from the investments that they've made. So, for example, when we said these resorts, Antalya, Antalya is very well known for being where all the Russians go to. I have a friend in Moscow, and she seems to live there. Sort of just drops into Moscow to pick up a paycheck, I think, and then she goes back to Antalya. She's there all the time. It's this pervasive influence of this money and what it actually does to the countries where it goes. But this is money which should be being used not by these mega wealthy people, but should have been used to supply things like hospitals and healthcare and asphalt on the roads and this type of thing for normal people. That's the way I look at it anyway. Other people may say, well, why should the poor have access to hospitals? It's much better that the wealthy have their mega millions lying in Swiss banks. That could be of course, what you say. Okay, right. So let's have a look at some of the. So I'm going through some of the comments now. Right. Okay. Well, about the wood oven. Yeah, wood oven does make better pizzas. I agree. There's a place in Gdansk. Just mentioned it here. There's a place in Gdansk got a wood oven. It's near Oliva Cathedral, and it's really good. Yeah, but you wouldn't want to cook with a wood oven every single day. I think maybe you would, but it's much. The thing is like this: Russia has, I've forgotten how many, 200 billion cubic meters, I think it is, or something like that, of gas exported every year, and Russian people don't have access to gas. That is the point. Anyway. Emir says that some say that Putin wants to rebuild a Russian empire. Yeah, it could be that. See, what Putin's done, though, the communists failed to do, is whereas the ideology is somewhat similar in many respects, but what Putin's done is to use the church, whereas the communists made the mistake of being theoretically atheists. Putin's actually got the idea, and he's using it. Putin clearly seems to believe that he has been appointed by God, no less, to rebuild the Russian Empire. And he's not the first person to have sort of these dreams of delusions of grandeur. They have happened before. I've mentioned before that Putin seems to believe that he is the impersonation of Russia, the same way as Hitler believed that he was the impersonation of Germany. In fact, Hitler failed to distinguish between himself and German. It was absolutely the same thing, and Putin is in the same idea. he believes that he is Russia, and certainly with the worship he's getting from the churches at the same time, and so he's using the churches and using the state propaganda and this to produce this idea of Russian imperialism. The thing is like this: problem with imperialism is you don't know how far you go back. You don't know what stage, where is the border. So this is the thing, borders change all the time. I mean, if you're going to reinstate the British Empire, you might say, well, let's go back to 1898, because that's usually given as the point when it's biggest. But hang on, just a minute, I wouldn't mind some of them colonies in North America. So, okay, so what we'll do, we'll have the colonies in North America. We'll go to 1774, for example, but that means we're going to have to get rid of some of these places in Africa. So, it just depends on what border, how far back do you go? And this has changed constantly. Does he want the Russian borders that existed prior to World War I? Is that what he's after? Or does he want to occupy the same as what they were in 1945, for example, to occupy all of Central and Eastern Europe? We don't know what he wants. So anyway, good, right. Bogdan writes, there were some audio interceptions of which Russian soldiers were complaining that the Ukrainian side had roads and pavements and lights in the small cities and villages, and they're rich. Yes, not only that, Bogdan, but I even saw video of it. There was a school in which they were complaining. So how come what gives you the right to have to be this wealthy? Why should you be wealthy and we're not? So, okay. Colin writes that it's like 1984. Putin is now at war with Eurasia. When will it be the turn of East Asia or Oceania? In the book 1984, there is a constant state of warfare, because it's a novel. And the point of having a constant state of warfare is that it gives people someone to hate. And in the book, we see that the enemy somehow changed. And I don't quite understand the point of the enemy changing, but the enemy changed. And the reason for this was clear up of disinformation, which was done by the resistance to the government. And so, anybody who wants to have an idea of the totalitarian ruble should have a look at 1984. It's a good book as well. The film I thought was pretty awful. I think we hadn't read the book, we wouldn't understand the film. Then again, so the film came out in 1984, which was now 38 years ago. Russia's always been poor. Yeah, but Russia has always been poor, but it shouldn't be. This is the point. It shouldn't be. And if there wasn't this concentration of wealth in the hands of a very few people who are then exporting that wealth and using it to buy football teams and mega yachts and things like this, this is the problem. Because when you take people out of poverty and you start giving them infrastructure, then wealth starts to produce by itself. If somebody has access to the internet, then they can start selling stuff they make in their back garden. If they've got a road outside, they can start delivering it. And if they've got things like sewage, and then they're not going to get ill so much, so they can spend more time working instead of lying ill. And this is the problem, because if there is wealth is better distributed amongst people, then they have the capacity to work better. And I think this is sort of straightforward economics. And okay, so in Serbia, there is a prophecy called Kremenansko Prosabanstvo. Sorry, I don't speak Serbian. Similar to Varga. Written. He said that Russia will become an empire Yeah, Russia will be. The question is this: why does somebody want to have an empire? Why? What good does it do? How will it benefit your life? I mean, if you look at a map and say that's ours, but you're living in abject poverty and you haven't got your toilet is a hole in the garden. In the winter, it's freezing cold, and until the crops are brought in, you're starving. I mean, what would you rather have? An empire or enough to eat? Well, anyway, maybe you'd rather have an empire. Maybe it's just me. So anyway. Bye, Isa. Thanks all. Isa is in Japan, so obviously in Japan it's very late right now, and Colin writes that the AfD and Alternative for Deutschland wants the return of the former Eastern Territory. So I'm not so certain they do actually, but maybe it did. But the thing is, they're not that. Not too bothered about AfD. In any case, within the European Union is a very large area. So you can say that this is all part of the same thing. So, well, from the perspective of Russian oligarchs, Russia is very rich. They have their private rivers and private mountain ranges, and they live in palaces. Yes. For them, it's very rich, but they take their money abroad. This is the problem. And the attitude of the British government was this: said if these people are taking money, bringing money to the United Kingdom and paying tax on it, and paying, and they may be employing people in the UK, and then they've got national insurance and all that stuff, then these people are welcome. Most countries will welcome investors, and so if you've got $250,000, I think it is. Maybe it's 300,000. You can get United States. You can invest that in the United States, and you can get United States citizenship. And there's various countries within the European Union which offer schemes like this as well. Malta does. I think Slovenia does. Portugal does. And I'm sure there's many countries around the world that you say, well, look, I'll invest so much money. Please, can I become a citizen? The problem is with this is that the people who are most successful and potentially have the most to offer poorer countries are then denied to these poorer countries. So the poorer countries continue to get poorer and poorer, and the richer ones get wealthier and wealthier. Now, I've got nothing against people getting wealthier and wealthier. I think that's great, but I don't like the idea that the poor are getting poorer and poorer. And I don't think that is sustainable long term. I think this only leads to problems. And now Obese Tuna writes something really relevant. Britain's a small land there in New Zealand, half the population is Russia, yet look at the size of their economy. Yeah, so the Russian economy is smaller than that of the Netherlands. The Netherlands, you can drive, you could probably walk through it in a couple of days, never mind anything else. This a country which has got this huge amount of poverty, this huge land mass, and this wealth which is being concentrated in the hands of so few. It's quite bad. Okay, right. I'll tell you something before I change the subject a bit, unless there's more questions on sanctions. There was something happened today, and I was going to do a video on it, but I was so disgusted. In the end, there was a Russian soldier, 25 years old, lieutenant, and he's from Pskov, and he committed acts of sexual assault, pedophilia, on infants and children, but some cases. And I started to do a video, and the thing was this. I saw his social media account, Vkontakte, vk.ru, and it was still there. He had films of what he did. I started watching for 10 seconds of one, and I turned it off. I was that disgusted. Anyway, he has been arrested in Russia. But anyway, I was starting to do a video, and I thought, no, I'm just coming up. First of all, it's meant to be sort of historical, but anyway, I was just totally disgusted, and my science turning, or sort of burning. I was so horrendous, and not only that, I mean, it was all still visible. This is the thing. And not only that, he previously had a record of taking kids away, and his telephone number was visible, and 2 telephones in fact. And I don't know. I suspect that the account may well. This was this morning. I suspect it might not be there any longer. But anyway, I thought I wanted to do something on this, but I just decided it was absolutely horrendous, and I didn't. Internally, I was really sickened by it. Anyway, yeah, I see. So Annie's heard about it, and Obese Tuna as well. So I've heard about it. So yeah, very good. Okay, right. Just one last thing I think before I finish for the night is Emmy writes about the wealth of a nation. You see, in the southern Balkan countries are poorer, while the northern ones are wealthier and they have a higher average IQ. I would argue that intelligence quota largely does depend on how one measures it, and I did an IQ test. It was 143, I think it was. But then again, it was certainly based towards. I mean, some of the questions, like for example, related to gearing and how gear works, which works faster. There were and other. I thought that mathematical things I think was largely due to background. If somebody told me to make something with my hands, I can't do it at all. I'm useless. So absolutely useless. So I'm not so certain IQ is always a good way of measuring anything. So thank you very much for being here. Tomorrow we'll see the 13th of April is the 79th anniversary of the discovery of the mass graves in Katyn. So the Katyn forest massacre, which was committed by the Soviet Union in April of 1940 on Polish officers, and not just officers, but Polish prisoners of war and civilians. This was discovered, and it had major political consequences. So I've done a short video on that. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being here, Bogdan, Lee. Oh, sorry. So Lee's only just got here, and now I'm finishing. Well, you can go over to the other channel, Lee. I'm doing one over there in half an hour's time. And so thanks. So everybody enjoy Monday. Monday is obviously the least popular day of the week. And thanks for being here. I'm sorry for I know that it's not a very good camera on this, and also the lighting, also because of the fact that I've got this. This is more like a temporary abode for me, and so I haven't got any curtains here. And so it's a bit like a box in here, really. I mean, I won't be staying here all that long. So anyway, thanks very much, and yeah, and all the best to everybody. The other channel's not on History, Lee, it's on Motorhome, so a completely separate subject. So thanks to everybody, and good night. No up to Bona. Yeah, I'm not invisible. Okay, I'll turn it off now. See you, Hank. See you, Annie. I'm ending it now. Okay.